We're very, very lucky to have David McGuire, the Executive Director of Connecticut's ACLU, speaking to us tonight. David joined the Legislative Policy Team at Connecticut ACLU in 2007. In 2016, David was appointed Executive Director. In his now 13 years with the ACLU of Connecticut, David has litigated cases to protect incarcerated people's rights, separation of church and state, and free speech rights. David also is the chair of Connecticut's Special Advisory Committee to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. We are delighted to have the executive director of the Connecticut ACLU speaking to us tonight. David, thank you so much.
Thank you for that introduction. I'll take questions.
I'm going to jump in and ask a question. One of them is fake family planning centers. I think maybe you could tell people what they are and what the position of the ACLU is and what ACLU might be doing it.
Thank you for bringing that up. So there's been a proliferation of centers that are essentially designed to look like a place where a woman can think about getting an abortion, but in fact are the very opposite. They're religiously funded institutions that are designed to trick women into going in and then being convinced not to have an abortion. And Hartford's the place that it's originated as a really big issue because they set up right down the road from, for example, the Planned Parenthood and really try to prey on people that are seeking reproductive health care, which is what gave rise to the ordinance. We worked on the Hartford ordinance. This is a complicated one for us. We're certainly pro-choice, staunchly pro-choice, but we also believe in free speech rights. We were able to work with the proponents of that ordinance to find a way to deal with that, what is essentially unfair or deceptive advertising. That's really what it is. You're trying to deceive someone, which you don't have a constitutional right to do. Hartford passed that ordinance 2 years ago. That is effectively illegal now. Enforcement of it is still something that's serious. We're trying to model a statewide law after the Hartford ordinance, and we work with the proponents of the statewide law, and that's something that we're thinking should be able to pass in the next couple of years.
So one of the other issues at this session that we weighed in on was vaccinations. Care to comment on that one?
Yeah, so on vaccinations, we have gotten several calls over the last couple of years from folks that are wanting the ACLU to come out and say that getting rid of the religious exemption would be a constitutional violation. We have resisted those calls. We believe that with serious illnesses, there is a compelling interest that the government has to require vaccination. And we do believe, based on some numbers that have been reported, that a lot of people are using the religious exemption insincerely. It's impossible to test that, but the rise in certain areas has been marked. We do believe that there needs to be a medical exemption if someone is going to have a detrimental impact by being vaccinated. That is one very different thing. You're having a doctor sign off on that. We are not pro removal of the religious exemption, but we are neutral on it. So I have made clear to legislators that we will not be bringing a lawsuit, for example, if that was to pass.
So the background for the other people on the call is basically currently in Connecticut, there is both the medical exemption and the religious exemption. But for the religious exemption, you don't have to prove anything. You just say, I'm religious, so I don't want to do it. In most other cases, if you believe you have a sincerely held belief, you have to in some way demonstrate that this has been an active force in your life. But with religious exemptions, people don't ask for any kind of evidence that you've actually been religious at all for anything. The reason it's been brought up recently is because the number of people claiming this has been on the rise, so that it destroys herd immunity for people non-vaccinated becomes very large, then it is a health threat.
When there's a vaccination for an illness that can potentially kill or seriously injure someone, that is a matter where, in our estimation, there is a compelling governmental interest.
Do you see this as perhaps changing their position once a vaccine is created for COVID, that this becomes a public health issue, that this might override some of the objections to finally getting a bill passed that would take away what has become really an abuse, the exemption policy.
I don't think that the COVID vaccination will change our position to being supportive of the removal of the religious exemption. We would remain neutral. But I think it helps the overall effort, because once there's a vaccination for COVID, I believe that legislators will see it is even more important and timely to make sure that most people are vaccinated. I think that that issue is gaining momentum before COVID came anyway. And I believe that the widespread nature of COVID and the fact that people have had such firsthand experiences with it will likely make it more likely to pass and harder for people to argue that they should be able to not get vaccinated. But again, I think we will remain neutral in all likelihood. But I think that this is a shot in the arm for the removal of the religious exemption, to use a bad pun. I wanted to touch on one other topic that I know both of our groups have worked on, that is aid in dying, or death with dignity. It's an issue that we are very supportive of and have played a supportive role in for basically as long as I've been with the ACLU of Connecticut. You know, we believe that people have right to self-determination and personal autonomy. And I do expect that is an issue that will come back up next full session, unless there's a major leadership change or a shakeup. It seems like the Public Health Committee is committed to that issue, and I think there's building support for it. So just wanted to flag that as an issue that we have in the past been supportive of and will continue to be.
Is our immigrant rights and deportations a big deal in Connecticut? What's been going on there, and is that anything the ACLU has been involved in?
Yeah, great question, Amy. So yes, it is a real issue here in Connecticut. Connecticut has had many people picked up from Donald Trump's deportation machine. And we, for a little over a year, had a immigrant protection project at the Hartford Immigration Court that we staffed with the ACLU of Massachusetts on a kind of two-state collaboration, trying to figure out what the immigration law judge was doing and who was being picked up, why they were being detained, and things of that nature. They have stopped actually holding hearings at that immigration court. So that project no longer continues, but we still work with what's called the Connecticut Immigrant Alliance, Sierra it's called, and they have worked on several things. One bill, which we hope comes up again this year, is we call it the 364 bill. The federal law and definition of what is a serious crime that triggers deportation is if it is a prison sentence of 365 days or more. In Connecticut, a misdemeanor is up to 365 days. So a misdemeanor conviction for anything, whether it be 6th-degree larceny, stealing a candy bar, or anything up from that, triggers deportation consequences. And that's deeply problematic. So there's been a push to change the maximum penalty of misdemeanors to 364 days, which would make a dramatic impact on immigration cases. And that's something that's been almost through the process a couple of times. So that will be very much a live issue here in Connecticut.
That's something I would want to help support. And that sort of leads to the question, how can we best help support the ACLU Connecticut? Both, you were saying there's a 501c3 portion and a 501c4. So could you talk a little bit about how we help both efforts?
That'd be great. Yeah. So you go to our website, acluct.org. And as Amy said, we have two entities. We have the 501c3, which is called the ACLU of Connecticut Foundation. That's essentially our legal department and our education work. So that's where we have a legal director, a staff attorney, and a paralegal, and that's where they do their work. And gifts that you make to that foundation are tax deductible. And that is critical to our work, because our legal underpinnings are very important to our success on the policy side. The 501c4 is just the ACLU of Connecticut. And that's our membership organization. We have around 15,000 members in Connecticut right now. Those membership fees are not tax deductible. Those help us do our legislative policy and lobbying works. We have a very robust, large department. You may have heard of our Smart Justice campaign, which is to end mass incarceration. That's housed in that department. That's where our police campaign that we will launch in the next year or so will be housed. And we also have a policy council who does tremendous work. And then we have our communications department that bridges both of those. So those are the two ways to contribute, by becoming a member or making a donation. And then we have a really robust social media program. So if you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, these are refreshed with really good information and calls to action regularly. So I recommend going on whichever platform you use, if any.
but there are no email blasts. So it's one of the social media platforms.
So you can sign up for our action alerts, and if you become a member, you're signed up as well. We really are I pride us on being pretty responsible with that list and not overusing it. You'll get more during the legislative session, but typically we're pretty judicious in how we use it. But our social media accounts are just as up to date and often are linking to the actions that you would get by email as well.
Well, in our group, we have a social action committee, and we're looking for things. We get some recommendations from the Secular Coalition for Connecticut, which is aligned with a lot of the things that you care about as well.
Yes.
But we would probably want to know about what you're thinking about and where you need support as well. Yeah, written testimony and sometimes in-person testimony if it's something, you know, individual members are passionate about.
That's great.
Thank you all, and especially thank you, David.
Thank you for having me, everyone.